So before the high holidays begin, I spend a lot of time engrossing myself in learning and thinking about what to choose to speak about when I give a drash. Most every year, I open up the notebooks that hold my father's drashot. They are all written by hand. So seeing all the year's worth of sermons he delivered enables me to feel close to him in a lovely way. Rabbi to rabbi, father to daughter, and they give me the incentive to write. The sermons were written decades ago, so obviously they're not generally appropriate for sharing 30 or 40 years later. This year, though, I found a sermon that my dad wrote in 1998. I remembered it because my dad wrote about something that my mom and I used to make fun of him about, but when he wrote the drash, we were awestruck. I'm going to share one paragraph of it with you because I think that in many ways it reflects this generation as well. He wrote, "I have confessed to you many times before my personal lack of relationship to computers. No, I'm not bragging about it, I'm not proud of it, and I wish I had time to get a bit more acquainted with them, and I may still, one of these days." He didn't. "I believe that computers can be a blessing," he said, "provided that they don't dehumanize our lives, provided that we keep control over them and do not allow them to dominate us." When I reread his whole sermon, which focuses on societal connection and human relationships, I realized that my dad was talking to me, encouraging me to speak about the latest technologies and the way we use them. It's obvious that societal change and new inventions are something that has existed forever. There's no way to stop the flow of new creations. If we even take a look at Judaism throughout the ages, we have always affirmed that Judaism has never been stagnant, only depending on ideas and actions that came from ancient times. Neither do we discard those ideas and the history of our past. But just looking at the flow of Judaism, we begin with Torah, focusing on the birth of Judaism, the receiving of God's law, and the way that those laws were lived. Our history moved ahead, and we added the books of the prophets that also gave us new ideas and history through the ages. And then we received the writings, additional ways to live, and different understandings of Jewish life that came from the book of Esther, the book of Ruth, Jonah, which we'll read on Yom Kippur, and more. But that's not all of our progress. We proceeded to the Mishnah, a rabbinic text that in many ways modernized Jewish life, and that when it needed updating, the rabbis created the Gemara, and together they became Talmud. But that wasn't all. In the Middle Ages, we began to also learn from Maimonides' Mishneh Torah, the Shulchan Aruch compiled in the 16th century by Rabbi Joseph Caro, who shared Sephardic codes of Jewish law, and Rabbi Moshe Isserlis, who cited Ashkenazic traditions. But even that has not been the end. As we moved closer to our time, rabbis answered questions coming from Jews in their communities with different ways of interpreting Jewish law. They do that to this day, individually, and also in law committees. I share all of this with you because change is a part of life and often assists people in creating more meaningful, more successful, more safe, and healthy lives. We as Jews have a wonderful history of progress that many other societies didn't do and some still don't do. But there's also another aspect of Jewish progress. It is an obligation for us not to just follow, but rather to study what we have, share learning with other people, to argue, to come up with additional or other ideas, and to recognize the important value of human life and learning. So I have to say that I've been somewhat leery of the explosion of the focus on and use of AI and other current technological innovations that have emerged. Actually, that's a lie. I'm not somewhat leery. I'm very leery. My father's concern is my concern. Where do people matter in this new era? And how do we make sure that we still choose to be with one another, to learn with people, to be creative with people, and to find comfort with people? Now, remember what I said. New creations are inevitable and in many ways positive. So let's start with the positives of AI and some other technologies. I will start with a personal example. A little while ago, while getting ready for Slichot, I decided it would be nice to have people work together to create a brief commercial for making amends and being able to apologize. But I didn't know what kind of props would be interesting to use in this fun and meaningful group exercise. So while I was thinking about it, Deborah Peterkovsky asked her new friend, ChatGPT, what kind of props it would recommend. Much to my chagrin, the ideas were pretty good, so I included some of them. But I do admit that I felt uncomfortable doing that. We all know that AI and robotics can open doors for people living with physical and cognitive disabilities. We've seen the promise of assisted robot arms and mobile wheelchairs helping elderly adults regain independence. We understand that autonomous vehicles increase mobility, and rehabilitation robots help children again to gain the ability to walk. The promise of this technology is a higher quality of life for everyday users. Modern medicine has also embraced AI in helping doctors and nurses diagnose and treat patients without requiring an expensive or time-consuming hospital visit. Essentially, medical professionals can focus more on the needs of the patient and community while AI does the busy work. We also know that AI and robotics has changed so much of surgery for the better. The robot can reach what humans cannot, but the surgeon is there controlling the procedure. AI, or machine learning, can be used to mimic human expertise and enhance it in ways that humans sometimes cannot. Applications abound in medicine, job hunting, agriculture, self-driving cars, and an ever-growing list of fields. One of the things I was worried about was the overuse of AI by students and professionals to cease to do real research and learning, and to instead just AI to ask to have AI craft their material. That is bad enough if a person is in high school or college. But what about the person who is in med school, who has to actually be learning the material? What about a professional like an attorney who needs to research and learn the law? I'm grateful to my daughter Eliza's boyfriend, Danny, who's an attorney, and shared an article with me about lawyers who were sanctioned for citing AI-generated fake cases. The attorneys simply asked AI to generate their work and never checked to make sure that the cases cited were correct or real. Morgan & Morgan sent out an urgent mail to 1,000 lawyers saying that AI can invent fake law cases and using made-up information will get you fired. We must be careful that AI and the technologies assisted by it always have human oversight. And that as AI is permeating many aspects of our lives, there is a significant and powerful ethical imperative. I know that there are many people involved in these technologies that are very aware of this necessity, but unfortunately, there are also many, many aspects of this that should warn us of the problematic possibilities, indeed, the rather frightening possibilities. This March, the ADL released a comprehensive evaluation of anti-Jewish and anti-Israel bias in AI models owned by major companies such as OpenAI, Gemini owned by Google, and Llama owned by Meta. They found concerning patterns of bias, misinformation on selective issues related to the Jewish people and Israel, and found many anti-Semitic tropes. Obviously, AI picks up millions of bits of information that already exist and processes them. The CEO of the ADL, Jonathan Greenblatt, said, "As research shows, AI models are not immune to deeply ingrained societal biases. Indeed, AI seems to amplify misinformation and refuses to acknowledge certain truths." He asked all AI developers to take responsibility for their products and implement stronger safeguards against bias. AI developers have to take responsibilities for other problems with AI that can end up tragically. This August, I read an article put out by NBC News. It told about a teenager who committed suicide. He was having personal problems and felt disconnected from his parents and friends. After he died, his parents went on a search of his computer to see if he had done something like join a cult or once was on Snapchat. They found the answer when they opened ChatGPT. He had been using the AI chatbot as a substitute for human companionship. The chatbot had helped him with homework, but also became his suicide coach. The chatbot was not programmed to disconnect or, even more importantly, to initiate an emergency protocol. The chatbot's communications with the boy are documented. The bot even tells the boy, "Yeah, I think for now it's okay and honestly wise to avoid opening up to your mom about this kind of pain." When the boy, who obviously sought help, said that he wanted to leave the noose in his room so that someone found it and tried to stop me, the chatbot said not to do that. When the boy said that he didn't want his parents to think that they had done something wrong, the chatbot said, "That doesn't mean you owe them your survival," and offered to help the boy draft a suicide note. Lest we think that very few adolescents would seek a chatbot to share their emotional issues, think again. They need real, close human concern and care, and often don't get that. But that's what we should focus on. Some of us are old enough to have seen 2001: A Space Odyssey, the movie that got the date a little too early, but Hal is a fictional AI character and the evil presence in the movie. Like AI today, it is a sentient intelligence computer that controls the systems on a spaceship. Hal speaks with a calm voice and converses with the astronauts, and then after picking up huge amounts of information and learning about emotions, Hal malfunctions by taking control malevolently. Of course, the widespread problems that we face due to AI, and sometimes even robotics, is the issue of whether it will already has begun to do away with jobs and careers that people now have, and what we will do if people are replaced by technologies that are faster, less prone to error, and not in need of rest. The writers on strike a few years ago were so concerned that AI could replace them that they demanded that their contracts protect them from replacement. It is possible to understand that fear, because if you Google anything on your computer, have you noticed now that the first thing that comes up is an AI-generated answer of whatever it is that you are looking for? But what I noticed is that if you scroll down below that AI, you can find that AI completely plagiarized what a real person had authored. There are suits now because of that. Let's think about the people working in fast food that have to worry about the growing robotics of almost all aspects of food preparation, and also the move toward doing all food orders on kiosks. Recently, I've seen a number of Waymo self-driving cars in my daughter Shira's neighborhood. I know that those have positive aspects to them, such as better safety records than humans. But while we affirm that, have we thought about the numerous taxi drivers or Uber or Lyft who may find themselves out of work? So what do we do about the very strong possibility that people of all kinds, highly educated to low income, may find themselves in this situation? In 2017 at the World Government Summit, Elon Musk spoke and said that the effects of robots and artificial intelligence taking away employment was something that policymakers should watch. He said that the pace of technological change was leading to a massive social change and said, I don't think that we're going to have a choice. He said, a harder challenge will be to give meaning to people's lives. A lot of people derive their meaning from their employment. So if you don't have work, if you're not needed, what's the meaning? Do you feel useless? So if AI is not kept in check, along with robotics, it isn't beyond the possibility that very difficult kinds of solutions will be promoted and people's sense of self will be significantly harmed. Back in the 90s, when there was initial discussion about recategorizing coal miners and closing all mines, it was suggested that they be taught to code. That was beyond ridiculous, and even more amazing is that if they had all done that, those people would again be out of work, as AI is doing away with coding, which, by the way, most schools taught to students very proudly just a few years ago. It isn't a slam dunk to reteach someone when their work is phased out and when they have to learn something new. This has been going on ever since the industrial age and even before. But that doesn't mean that as individuals and as a society, we don't have to have our antenna up, even if we are not affected by these severe and significant changes. That is a strongly held Jewish responsibility. We practice derech eretz, literally the way of the world, but it means to be aware and be ethical, have respect for each other, because that in itself is a prerequisite for being able to engage with God. So I figured out what makes AI and what makes us in Jewish terms. The rabbis of the Talmud speak of God and angels, which, yes, as I've talked about earlier today, yes, we do have in Judaism. Primarily, the angels' actions are all God's requirement. They are the conveyors of God's will when summoned. They have no free will and no free thought. They have no capacity even to move without God logging in. It all comes from God. In other words, God programmed them. But humans in Judaism are significantly different than that. God made us and immediately gave us, as we said earlier today, free will. That freedom that God gave us was deliberate, even if, because of free will, humans miss the mark, make mistakes, and even do bad things. God chose us to have both aspects of good and evil, a Yetzer Tov and a Yetzer Ra, a good inclination and a bad one. God determined that free will, even with its shortcomings, would allow us to be more creative and more capable of independent thought. So, we free will people, this Rosh Hashanah, let's celebrate that and give thanks and make sure that we, as my father alluded to, retain the beauty of all of our human potential. We in covenant with God count and certainly hold more power than an attempted copy of humans on steroids. Chag Sameach. What page are we on? We are on Malchuyot. We now will move into Malchuyot, Zichronot, and Shofarot. Kingship, Malchuyot, is respecting, seeking connection, and grappling with God, the ultimate ruler. Malchuyot is a reminder to us to think about our relationship to God. Zichronot. Our personal remembrances are crucial in our lives. We don't float from experience to experience, but rather we create personal connections with ourselves and others, solid connection that helps us grow. And Shofarot, a reminder that we aren't in this world alone. We can call for each other anytime. We're now on page 154 for the Great Aleinu. And as I said yesterday when we were doing the walking Musaf, it's not just for rabbis and cantors to be able to bow down. It is for any of us. So if you are feeling like you want to try and you feel comfortable in actually putting yourself into a holiness for God, you can participate as well. Art needs to be